Hello and welcome to the Wait I Know You podcast, season 1, episode 6. My name is Nick Rounds and my glasses are fogging up. I will also be your host. I just took a shower, I'm sorry. My next guest has devoted their life to the nurturing and cultivation of plants. They're the lead coffee roaster for Wrecking Ball Coffee Roasters in the San Francisco Bay Area. They've also studied horticulture and agriculture extensively. So much so that they can tell you exactly how you're killing your houseplants. More on that later. Izi Aspera. Wait, I know you. How are you today?
I'm awake.
Awake, conscious, with the living. Well, you're doing better than I am because apparently my glasses are fogging the hell up.
Too hot.
So welcome to Wait I Know You. My podcast is about people that have done really awesome things and really interesting things. Being a coffee roaster is a very unique career and not a lot of people know about it. So I wanted to interview you today about all the cool things you do at your job. So first off, I'm going to be asking you obviously a lot of questions about coffee. But before we dig into that, where did your love of plants stem from?
Oh, God.
I had to get one dad joke in there before I let you start talking.
Just the first one. I know it's downhill from here. I think it was mostly just like a lot of people, you grow up around plants, and like we had a lot of potted plants from moving from apartments to apartments that it was just a fun chore to take care of. Like a little chore was to water the plants, and I was lucky enough to like go on hikes with my parents and see a lot of different types of landscapes and flowers and whatnot. And so it was a something as an adult now that I can like know that I can do art and love plants. But at the time I was like, oh man, like I think I need to decide whether I'm going to go into plant biology or if I'm going to do art. And because I both loved them a lot when I was younger. But actually didn't start hoarding plants until I think like maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, because I was killing a lot of them. And it's like I didn't want to like my coffee. Thank you.
Very, very important coffee refill.
Yes.
Very on brand for you. Hi, JJ.
Hello.
You're now on my podcast, sucker.
Yeah, I need this if I'm gonna talk. Yeah, I was killing a lot of plants and I was really upset about it. And I didn't have money to buy plants, and so I was also adopting. For some people, just was like, "Oh, you like plants?" I was like, "Yeah, I love plants," and they would just give me their dying plants, and I would try and take care of them.
So you're like a plant ER doctor in training, kind of.
Yeah, and I kind of have that reputation now more than anything. A lot of people don't know that I study plants. And they'll ask for advice like on Instagram or whatever, and I'll be like, I'll send them messages, and then they'll just be like, do you want this dying plant? Do you want to take care of it? But yeah, it's kind of just been a thing that nature in general, I've been attracted to for a while. Even within my art, I incorporate plants and nature, and so I now know that now that I'm older that I can like share hobbies. Like I don't have to just pick one thing to study. And I think a lot of people that know me are like I don't understand, what do you do? Because you have so many hobbies. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just not a person that can just like obsess about one thing.
Do you have any favorite plants from your childhood, either indoors or outdoors, that really stick with you?
Yeah. So I don't know why it was just like like being an annoying child that I was, I got obsessed with plant names, and I don't know why I knew the scientific name for ginkgo, which is this ginkgo biloba. But just the sound, it was probably some PBS special. It was like, this is the name of, but then I wouldn't stop bothering my mom about it. And I also knew like some other facts about like the bird of paradise. And for a while, I became obsessed with it. But ginkgo biloba definitely is one of my favorite plants. It's just like a cool, old, never decided to evolve, for millions of years. It was like, no, I'm fine. This is my final form. I don't need to do anything.
I'm already a Charizard. I don't need to evolve further.
Yeah, it figured it out really early on. And every time we passed a ginkgo biloba tree, I would annoy the heck out of my mom and remind her that that's the ginkgo biloba tree. And the bird of paradise, it's not my favorite anymore, but I always thought it was cool because like you could eat the nectar, like it was really sweet. And so I would, even when I was really young, I knew how to identify those plants and I knew their names, and I was really annoying about it. um, yeah, but I think ginkgo's the one that stuck with me the most. There's definitely like the more that I learn about plants, there's like more plants that I like become obsessed with and have brief love affairs with.
You even have a tattoo of ginkgo as well.
I do. I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna show it or not, but I
No,
do.
no, I mean you're wearing a long sleeve, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
don't. This is not the show and tell of that kind of sort. We're not trying to show bare bottom. What is it? Your forearm, or like the crook of your
oh
elbow, kind of.
yeah, it's like right
Yeah.
next to my elbow. But that was like me and my mom's like tattoos that we got together. She also has one like on her chest, so they're like they're both just like identical, adorable.
Close to the heart.
Yeah.
Are there any houseplants that you saved that you're surprised that you saved? And are there any common ones that are super easy to kill?
Oh my god. Yeah, so I actually still have two plants that have been living for almost 8 years now, and I have tortured the heck out of them, and they still keep going. I adopted two philodendron plants, very popular house plant to have, and I adopted them when they were dying and they were root bound. So the roots had taken up the entire pot, and I separated them. And I think just like cut them up so that they could propagate in water. And I had them in water for the longest time. I think for like 5 years. They just continue to grow these tap roots, and they love it. They just love. You could be really mean to them, and they will still survive. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've had them for so long is because they just put up with whatever condition they're in. They just like want to survive. Also, in the wild, they like to grow on trees. They actually absorb nutrients through rainfall and through whatever's falling from the tree. So technically, they're pretty industrious plants, and I would say easy to grow as well. I both have they're finally in soil, but I have them to this day. And I have some just like golden pothos that people have always been like, it's dying, please take this. And I'm like, okay. And I love propagating those plants. You can just take cuttings from them, and they take abuse. Like, they will let you know when they're thirsty, and they wilt, and you give them some water, and then they like rejuvenate like nothing happened. Um, but at the same time, those plants can be easy to kill if you're really not paying attention. I definitely don't like a lot of indoor plants that are tropical. because you're putting them in a condition that's not tropical, or you have to mimic that tropical experience for them to thrive. And so they're always being tortured. I mean, technically, the golden pothos and the other plant that I have are both tropical, but they are more industrious just because they're climbing plants and they love to send out tap roots to get more nutrients. So they're constantly just like, they're ready for an environment where there might not be a lot of nutrients in the soil, like in tropical rainforests, and they're ready for conditions where nutrients is constantly being sucked out of the soil from rainfall. So they're good plants, but also, yeah, anybody could kill them.
That's hilarious. So it seems like there's been a sudden resurgence in people's passion for houseplants, specifically plant stores popping up out of nowhere. There's a lot of those in Seattle here. What are your thoughts on people's sudden interest in houseplants?
I mean, it's great, and to a point, like it gets people to be exposed to plants and like what it takes to take care of them, and a lot of the ways where you could even look up like, how do I take care of this plant? And they have to think about sunlight. They have to think about nutrients. They have to think about the soil. They have to think about air quality, water quality, which are like, I think anybody going into like just having a plant doesn't think, oh, I need to think of all of these things. This plant's reliant on me for all these things. They don't imagine that. They just think, oh, I just need to water it and it'll be fine. And in that case, most plants die because they're like, you forgot to fertilize me. Thanks. The downside is, you know, I think a lot of the plants that people buy are trendy, and it becomes this rat race to get these very expensive, very rare, overly hybridized or overly bred plants. You know, it's just like a show dog. It's like the more that they're bred, the controlled, the harder they become and the more expensive they become. And then it's just like, I guess if that's fun for you, I'd like go for it. But I think a lot of people put that as like the end of the race. They're like, this is what I need to strive for. And it's like, no, like just try taking care of a spider plant. Like just try taking care of a ficus. Like, you know, like you could start with an easy plant that can take abuse and it could still be challenging. And if it doesn't work for you, maybe we should consider, I don't know, a succulent, which, you know, another plant that people don't understand. Like they need water, they can take abuse, but like you can't neglect them. So a lot of the questions that I end up answering, and a lot of my like quote unquote customers are, I'm just basically helping them navigate what it is their plants need. Like, did they change their soil recently? Did they fertilize? When's the last time they fertilized? Like, people are always like, oh, I water regularly. I'm like, okay, how much water did you give them? And what does regular mean? Like once a week, twice a week? It's like it's a very simple thing, but they're taking care of something that can't speak, you know? So you kind of have to keep an eye on it and be observant.
Is there any one plant that you think is the most overrated or seems like the one that people tend to chase after the most?
Oh God, there's all these different varieties of tropical plants that have white markings on them, and it's just a type of lack of chlorophyll. And sometimes having a lack of chlorophyll just means it can be pink or yellow or white. And in some cases, it's actually a type of virus. In other cases, it's just like a genetic mutation. And so, like any genetic mutation, it's like, oh, this is rare. This is interesting. I mean, who doesn't love like a pink leaf plant, you know? And I think it's really cool, but like some of those plants already being tropical, need a lot of attention and care. Now you have a plant that's lacking chlorophyll. So a majority of this leaf that has these white markings or pink markings can't produce food for itself. And now you need a fertilizer, which it's hard to find a fertilizer unless you're making it yourself that's ethically sourced. So now you have to buy this non-ethically sourced fertilizer, huge carbon footprint, to keep this plant alive. I'm like, there's not enough interest there for me to spend like $400 on a plant.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work.
There's a lot of work.
You studied horticulture and agriculture. What are some of the topics or things within those industries that you had no idea about until you studied them in school?
Oh man, there was so much. I mean, the soils class we took, soil quality and testing, was mind blowing because I literally just, there's really no way to, you're all guessing. You're guessing how much a plant probably needs for fertilizer, or not even fertilizer, just what's in the soil, right? And you're hoping the soil has enough biome to support itself. Fungus, bacteria, even larger species like worms, beetles, everything that helps like the cycle continue, you're hoping there's enough there for this plant. And then the plant is like, I don't like this soil. And you have to like guess. You have to do all this guess. It's like solving a mystery, you know? It's like I can use all these devices to figure out, oh, the soil pH is too high, you know, and it's I didn't know how difficult it could be to make that diagnosis. And it was just like fascinating to do all those tests in class and still just have to be like, well, this is my hypothesis about what's going on. Like I can only provide all this information and then go off of that. And that's like on a bigger scale, when you think about farmers needing to do that, they're growing the same crop maybe every year, maybe rotating. They have to like reintroduce all this nutrients in the soil. And it was just like mind blowing to be like, the amount of labor that goes into producing food. I'm just trying to keep the leaves on my plant alive. Like I'm just trying to get new growth to happen. And farmers are trying to produce consistent crops and have to fertilize and have to, you know, you could lose so much money on making the wrong hypothesis about what those crops need. So large scale production was just like mind blowing to me as well. And it was just cool to understand how things evolve, like the ginkgo being the one prime example. It figured it out early on, didn't need to evolve. The same with like buckeye, didn't really need to evolve. Figured it out pretty early on, you know, even though like the animals that used to be alive that would consume the seeds or the fruit are no longer here. It's like, it's fine. I'm still gonna not evolve.
I'm perfect just the way I am.
Exactly. It's definitely something to strive for. My goal in life is to be a ginkgo and a buckeye.
As a plant layman, it seems like just from talking to you for a short time, it seems like fertilizer seems to be the thing that people underestimate as far as like the importance of actually successfully nurturing a plant. And that explains why I've killed so many houseplants myself and I don't bother.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, when people start getting really nerdy about plants, they reach for fertilizer, and it's like it's honestly the last thing that I ever suggest people do. I mean, outdoors is a different situation. Like I said, where there's, a circle of life happening that helps replenish the nutrients of the soil. You take like a pot of soil that has no bacteria, probably no fungus, probably. Most of the bags of soil you've gotten from a garden center are usually sterile, and then they add fertilizers. They add things that will eventually break down and release nutrients. To speed up that process, people are like, I'm just going to give my plant fertilizer. And we're all familiar with Miracle-Gro, the idea that it will force things to bloom, it'll force things to grow faster. And I don't know, like if you were forced to grow faster as a child, you would think there'd be some repercussions, right? Well, for
Right.
plants, it shortens their lifespan. And I think it's just such a easy, it's like, oh, we just need to take vitamins every day or something, and like we'll be fine. No, there is, well, unlike taking vitamins every day, there is repercussions for fertilizer. And constantly I run into the issue of people over fertilizing, and over fertilizing looks a lot like you haven't been watering. It looks like root rot. A lot of the symptoms that over fertilizing plants react to look so much like other issues, and it takes a while to kind of problem solve. Like, oh, I'm going to need you to stop fertilizing. You're killing your plant.
Awesome. And I want to talk about the other plant that you're obsessed with, which is your main source of income and your professional passion, which is coffee. And you're a coffee roaster, and the plant to coffee cup path is a really, really long journey, which not a lot of people understand or appreciate. Your portion happens to be where the final product is about to be bagged for consumers. But can you explain what steps are needed to happen before you can even start roasting coffee beans?
I'm so, it's so heartwarming to know that that the journey from plant to coffee roaster is such a long journey. That's
Well, I think it's an important subject. I do my research.
I know, but like it's just like I've been in coffee for 15 years now, and like it's such a hard concept to get that idea across to consumers. But yeah, there are many steps which I'm still learning to before we even start roasting. Like even creating a profile of what you want this coffee to do. You have to set an intention, right? What is this coffee going to be used for? Is it a blender? Is it a single origin offering? Is it just for espresso, or are we going to also use it for batch brew or pour over? Like that needs to be figured out first. Sometimes people are like, let's just taste these samples that an importer's given us, and then we'll decide what we want to do with them. And for us, we at Wrecking Ball, for an example, we already know what we want. We have certain slots for single origin that we need to fill. We have blends that we need to replicate despite the season. And we'll orders, we're not really the type of company where we send somebody to origin or the coffee producing regions to find a coffee. We don't have to do that. There's already people here who have tasted and sent people to origin and imported the coffee. And so basically like a retail experience. We can look at their website, we can order samples. And what did we get samples in recently of? I think Brazil. We've been sampling a lot of Brazils recently because of port delays, as
Right.
everybody's experiencing, and so we're trying to find stopgaps to uh, fill fill this position until our coffee actually arrives. And so we've just been tasting from different importers, Brazil, and what that looks like is we get really small, like 100-gram samples, maybe 200 grams, and we sample roast them. We have a very tiny, tiny coffee roaster that only roasts 100 grams of coffee. And it's, we usually taste the day after sample roasting. So it's all very fresh in comparison to the experience you get at a cafe. It's very different than just brewing coffee or pulling a shot of espresso. And it's just a technique that has been developed over time so that you can sample a product and decide whether you're going to buy it or not. So once all that's done, we finally selected a coffee that we want for whatever reason. We have to figure out how we'd like to roast it. And everybody does this differently. Everybody has their own technique of like, do you just put it in the roaster and roast it? Do you have a really strict profile that you're trying to mimic? And there's different techniques and modules that you could use to replicate roast. It's so easy nowadays to roast. And a lot of people in my life who are much older than me and more experienced than me would be like, oh, back in the day, you know, it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. It really wasn't as easy as it is today. And it's only easy because of them. There's also, depending on who you're buying from as an importer, quality might be an issue that you have to go through. We don't do like heavy, intense quality control because the people we're buying from are already specialty grade, which in itself is a whole nother topic of a discussion. It's a scoring system. It doesn't make sense to anybody except people who are in the industry and who are purchasing and selling coffee and want to give information back to the producer. And that is something you train for. It's something you calibrate as much as you can for, and you can even get certified for. Yeah, that is intense. But most of the time, we're not buying commodity coffee, which is it's not a lower grade, but it's any grade. You could still get really delicious coffees from commodity coffee.
What kind of jokester coffee is this?
Oh my god, there's so many good meme coffee accounts on Instagram. They're so good. They don't make any sense to anybody but people in the industry, but it's much needed.
What a nerd.
Yeah.
You mentioned specialty grade. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. There's people in the industry that wanted to feature how incredible coffee can be, and that happened several years ago. I don't have the information off the top of my head, but there was a specific person who was like, I want to sell amazing selection of coffee. And she worked her way up into the cupping rooms, which is how you sample coffee, and bought the company and kicked out all these people who were against her ideas. And she was basically the person who coined the idea of specialty just being this like premium grade coffee. And over the years, it's become the standard of like, oh, well, now people buy containers worth of coffee, but previously it was like only a handful of bags of coffee, kilos of coffee, that was meticulously graded and sorted, and a much different experience than just what you might get in Folgers. Like I said, commodity is not bad, but it's also just, it could be anything. Oh, she's here.
Your cat.
Yeah, the crinkling noise is Zeno attacking her carrot filled with cat.
That's fine.
Okay.
She can go nuts if she wants to.
Yeah. So yeah, specialty I think is what everybody associates with now, with third wave coffee, which is another term that was coined actually by my boss, and it was to kind of call to the identity of like we were a lot of coffee shops were pushing towards not just buying the cheapest coffee, they're purchasing coffee based on quality. And so that meant tasting coffee and grading coffee. And I think a lot of people can look at a coffee shop now and say, oh, that's like a specialty shop, or that's like a fancy hipster coffee shop. And they probably serve specialty coffee. Or you can look at a quote unquote second wave shop, which is more like I feel like they're more like community coffee shops. There's a lot of like people who hang out with laptops. The coffee's maybe like darker roasted, and it's more of a laid back environment. I have a hard time talking shit about second wave shops because I love them a lot, and I wish a lot of like third wave shops were more like them. But you walk into a second wave shop when there's couches. It looks like you're on the set of Friends or something,
Yeah.
There's coffee posters on the wall.
Respect to them.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve their flowers as well.
They definitely do. And I definitely have, I think a lot of people do have nostalgic feelings for second wave shops, not only because of their age, but because it's how most people get into coffee too. You're probably having it in a latte. It's a dark roast. It's the quality of the coffee is masked by milk or flavorings, whipped cream, and so you don't really have to think about how somebody pulled that shot of coffee. You just get to experience it with cream and sugar.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it's important to note as well is that those second wave coffee shops tend to be mom and pop shops as well. So
yeah, I think in the last 10 years, I feel like there's been more third wave shops that have become mom and pop shops and kind of are a bridge between second and third wave. Like any evolution of an industry, we tend to like run in the opposite direction and never look back at where we came from. And third wave shops have become so unfriendly and isolating and white. Like literally you can walk into some of those third wave shops and the walls are white and the employees are white and you're like, I don't belong here.
what kind of cracker establishment is this?
Exactly. It just it feels threatening. It's bad.
This place just asked for my ID. I'm just trying to get some fucking coffee here.
Exactly. Being carded at a coffee shop. Which is not usually the problem you have at a second wave coffee shop. Everybody's welcome. There's curmudgeon-y people, but it's fine. It's tolerated. You probably don't get paid enough. But what makes up for it is the community and the space you provide and the people you bring together. And third wave is finally introducing that into their cafes. They're like, oh my God, customer service is important. Hospitality is important. Like you can't just have an amazing product and think people are going to put up with your really bad customer service.
You can swear if you want to. I know you're trying to say bullshit. But you walk that one back a little bit.
I'm like half in customer service mode, like just talking on here, and like half like, oh, I want to like lay into how dumb this is. Like,
I get that.
I'm supposed to be this representative of the coffee industry.
It's okay. That's what therapy's for. I guess get away from curmudgeon-y topics or passionate topics. You mentioned cupping earlier, which people might have heard about, but they might not know what it is. So can you explain the purpose of cupping, and how does one learn to taste test coffee properly?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's properly. It's more of just like, it's a tool, it's a method. And it's something that we've been doing for a long time because it's just the fastest turnaround for information. I would love to assess coffee when it's a week out from the first day that we roasted it. You know, it's had time to off gas, it's had time to rest, and then it's aged out a little bit. For the purpose of purchasing a coffee or evaluating its cupping, we do it very quickly. And the way that looks like is similar to, I think, what people are familiar with, like French pressing, where you would leave the water and the coffee together. But except it's not in a French press canter. It's actually just in a cupping bowl. We also call them cupping bowls, but it's just in a little tiny bowl. And we keep the coffee grounds, a really small amount of coffee grounds and really small amount of water in the cup, and we let them emulsify together and extract. And you only have you never want to cup like more than 20 minutes. You know that if you leave a cup of coffee that's been freshly brewed around for 20 minutes, it's really intense, right? And so we cup when it's hot. We cup we're tasting when it's hot. We're tasting when it's mild. And then we'll do one last tasting of that individual cup when it's cooled down. And it looks really funny. There are coffee companies out there who, for fun, just for fun, usually for free, will teach you how to cup. And it's weird. I think a lot of people think that when you're a coffee professional that you are just drinking a bunch of coffee, which we do, but not not when we're cupping. When you're cupping, you actually have a spoon, like a soup spoon, and you just take a little bit of coffee, and similar to wine, you're aspirating, right, to get all of the coffee around your mouth, and to also make sure you want to get that aroma in the closest possible to your nose, your retronasal sensors. And that's all just a technique we do for evaluating quality. And then we spit, because you actually have to spit. Everybody knows, like, when you eat something and you ingest something and you breathe out, you can kind of smell what you just ate, right? And so that same concept, if you're trying to taste multiple coffees on a table, you don't want to ingest a coffee and then have that taint the way that you taste the next coffee. Mm-hmm. Especially if there's like a defect, or one coffee is like very fruity, or one coffee is like very tart. Like, you just we don't cleanse our palate. So it's just a method. You do it in wine, and you also do it for coffee. So on average, for us, when we evaluate a sample of coffee that we're going to purchase, we'll have 5 individual cups for that one sample. And so we could have, you can have 25 cups on a table of only 5 samples that you have to evaluate. And we have this very specific way that we score a coffee. And it looks really ridiculous. People the last place I worked, we were basically in a fishbowl. People watched us cup on a daily basis, and they're just like, how could you consume all that coffee? And it's like, oh, just wait like a few more minutes, and we'll make awkward eye contact as I spit coffee into this spittoon. It's really gross. So yeah, you have to carry around a cupping spoon, which is a soup spoon. You have to carry around a spitting spittoon, which can look very different for everybody, and then usually a clipboard to keep track of all your notes. And then you just have all these cupping bowls out filled with liquid, and you're tasting all of them individually. At our company, it's kind of our signature is to pull samples of every single roast that we do throughout the day and cup those, and that's called a production cupping, and that's very different. We only taste one cup per sample, and that's just a check mark. That's just like, I just need to evaluate this coffee to make sure I hit the roast profile and I didn't fuck anything up. Very different than the cuppings that we do for purchasing.
Yeah, a lot of people are familiar with wine and knowing that you have to taste it and spit it out, but not a lot of people know about the coffee version of that. And I think the first time I ever saw that, I was a little bit in awe of it, because as you say, if you're doing it publicly or like in a place where people can see you, it does look really weird. Because you're used to seeing the sommelier of, like, going around tasting stuff, but you don't necessarily equate the same thing for coffee. So it's always interesting to see people that are actively involved with that and like taste testing new coffee to see what they're going to bring into their shop is always interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of intentional that coffee is as cheap as it is because people have made sure that it never gets too expensive. Wine is, per bottle, for how many ounces a bottle of wine is, people would never imagine spending that much for coffee in liquid form. And that's very intentional. Coffee regions are all in regions that have been colonized. They're all grown by people of color. It's very intentional that we do not pay very much for coffee. If we're thinking about inflation, like, coffee should be like 5 times as much as it is, and also scarcity wise, it should also be pricier. But yeah, I try and equate coffee to wine frequently because I want people to realize that gap. The quality assurance is similar, right? But the pay is always lower for some reason.
Well, that actually brings up a good point, because I wanted to ask you the question: what is fair trade coffee, and why is it important?
Fair trade and also organic trade are important. I think they're a great introduction for people to think about paying more, and also think about how little money we send to origin for an exchange for such an expensive cup of coffee. There's many hands involved in producing coffee. It's all done by hand. There are very few countries and regions in the world where it is mechanically picked, and even mechanical pickers have their downside. So if you're buying specialty coffee, every single bean is picked by hand, and it's really hard to not get worked up about that when people complain about the price of coffee, because it's like, you have been conditioned to think that coffee should forever be this cheap product. And I understand why, but also, like, there is an ethical reason to why you should be paying more. Fair trade is always paying slightly above. So I would say, like, fair trade is like minimum wage, right? You need to start somewhere, and they are trying to make sure that everybody whose hands touch that coffee gets paid a minimum amount. I would argue that it's a great place to start because I would argue that producers, exporters, everybody who touches that coffee needs to get paid more. But just because you paid more than you usually would for a cup of coffee at a cafe also doesn't mean that that person paid their producers a minimum amount. So buying coffee that has a fair trade label on it, you could kind of take a little bit of relief in knowing that the minimum was paid. It's a certification that the farm has to go through. It's a certification that, it basically promises along the way people are paid the minimum. And there is the price of coffee fluctuates on a daily basis, and so fair trade is also making sure that no matter the fluctuation of the market, there's always going to be a decent price being paid to those producers. The same kind goes for organic. Usually organic coffees are pricier, but that kind of has to do more with, like, of course, what organic practices means when you didn't use pesticides or you used organic pesticides. The certification from farm to roastery has to be organic. So you pay more for your coffee, but it also doesn't mean that everybody got paid a decent amount.
It's a good start, but it's not the solution to everything.
Yeah. I would love for producers to get paid as much as I get paid an hour. And that's definitely not the case. And it's like, I feel like it's definitely the bare minimum that I can do is continue to advocate for it. It's also the downside to specialty coffee, right? We are paying more, supposedly we're paying more for the quality that we evaluated, the consumers evaluated. So we have the power to pay people more only if the coffee meets our standards. So that's kind of like, I don't know how ethical that is either, but it's definitely a higher price than what people purchase for commodity coffee, which could be $1. And that's devastating. $1 per pound or less. And there's been some really low moments in the past couple of years of coffee being below the C market, and it's devastating. We have producers who they don't benefit from growing coffee. They're in debt from growing coffee. Like, what? You can make more money moving into the city and getting a job. Like, there's not really anything for them to be growing coffee, right now in our day and age, when there's so many other jobs out there that would pay like $1 or $2 better. Like, it's devastating. So there is a incentive from the industry to do better and to reevaluate where we throw money into. And I definitely encourage people, if they, to at least buy fair trade coffee, but also look into the people that they buy coffee from. There should be some information on people's websites or, people you can talk to. I wouldn't say go talk to the barista and ask them how much are you paying for your coffee, because usually the baristas don't have privy to that information.
Right.
But you can always put pressure on companies to display that information. There is a push in the specialty industry to publish how much we pay for coffee. And not everybody's been able to produce that information. And a lot of people are against handing that over to the public. But I think it would help tremendously if customers were more aware of how much we pay per pound.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's a dumb question to ask during a pandemic, and you've already kind of touched on this earlier, as far as like the fact that you're sourcing coffee from Brazil thanks to shipping delays, which I think every industry is suffering from right now. But and you already mentioned, obviously, pay in general is a big problem in the coffee industry. But are there any other huge issues facing the coffee industry that you see, in your opinion, as far as like things that people might not know about?
Oh man.
Let's open that can of worms, shall we?
There's so many issues. I mean, it's gotten to the point where we call ourselves a coffee community because we're so desperate for some type of support system that we don't have at our workplaces. Like HR only serves the company is clear to us. There's baristas around the country that are unionizing, not just at places like Starbucks, but like small companies, because there's so many tactics out there of bullying or withholding wages and raises that you run into. And there's baristas out there like myself who've had to like study and memorize workers' rights because you constantly get screwed over. And unless you know that information, you really don't have a chance of not being screwed over, basically. And so there's everything you can think of happening right now. Besides the unions, there's sexual harassment cases, there's wage theft. There's tons of settlements going on with big companies for wage theft and withholding tips. There's so many issues, and I say that the coffee industry has a community, but it's more like a source of resources and protest. It's not like the type of community that we grow up with in here in our communities. You don't get to see these people on a daily basis, but we're all connected through Slack channels and Instagram groups and private messages. We're all doing as much as we can to be supportive of each other, even though we don't know each other. I don't know much about most of the coffee people that I talk to, but I'm providing any support I can when it comes to getting a better position, getting paid more, asking a friend to hire somebody that I barely know because they need a job and they need to get out of their toxic workplace. Like I think whenever I've explained to people that, we don't go to this cafe anymore because of a sexual harassment case that happened there, they're always shocked. They're like, oh, I wouldn't think at such a progressive, laid back industry that you would have those problems. I'm like, it's rampant everywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have humans working there, so that means you're going to have sexual harassment and everything else. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even talking about customers. Like,
yeah, I didn't want to make that assumption either, of saying that, just because you work in a customer facing industry doesn't mean that sexual harassment, you're insulated from sexual harassment internally too. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Most things that would be like HR or worker right related are usually just internal. Like it's almost a perk if there's a company out there who extends HR related instances to customers. It's kind of insane. Like there's not a lot of workers' rights that cover customer facing interactions.
Yeah, I remember visiting homeroom in Oakland, and I thought it was really smart that they started a campaign called "Not on the Menu," which is basically a very strong vocalization to say, "Please don't hit on our servers."
Mm-hmm.
And I think more people should know that just because you're bored and or attracted to somebody that you don't know, that is literally being paid to be nice to you, does not mean you get to hit on them.
Oh, I would love that to be extended to the coffee industry. I feel like we're so there's so many things on our plate that we're taking care of that it's such a simple thing that we should, have in our cafe window, it's so frequent that you get used to it really quickly and you kind of just brush it off really quickly. But like after 10 years, I was like, I don't care if I get fired. Like, I am going to stand up for myself.
Listen, old man, I'm tired of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I wish we had a better resource, than just what we have right now. Our community resources, our online resources. Actually, there are groups out there that are raising funds for baristas or just coffee professionals in general to get therapy. I With COVID specifically, when cafes shut down and there wasn't customers coming, and baristas live off their tips as much as they live off their wage. Virtual tip jars were created and raising funds. Even owners were raising funds for the baristas because, when you're laid off, you definitely don't get as much money as you would hope,
Right. Yeah, despite what propaganda wants you to think, that we're just living free, but especially in the San Francisco Bay Area where rent is exorbitant amounts, like there's no way that you can survive off of government checks and also pay your rent at the same time.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, I feel like at one point for like a good 5 years, like both my checks in a month I would need to pay rent, and then I was basically buying food with tips. And so if tips sucked, like we'd be eating less. So I feel really, really fortunate to be in the roastery nowadays and have just like regular hourly wage, but it also meant like working during the pandemic and sharing tip jars, virtual tip jars, donating to virtual tip jars, and hoping that everybody was able to get through it and was able to eat.
Yeah, that's super important. Well, thank you for sharing all that. I think those are all important subjects to talk about, but no, I feel like we need a palate cleanser. So we're not depressed after I finish this call.
You thought coffee was going to be a happy topic to talk about.
Well, I mean, I thought it would be. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Are there any idiot-proof ways or methods to make a good coffee at home? Asking for an idiot.
Oh, God.
That is my palate cleanser question for you.
Oh, God.
And don't say Keurig.
I'm not going to say Keurig.
I know you would. I know you wouldn't say that.
That would be a cheat. That would be a cheat because what Keurig does is consistency, right? And so it's the same product. It's the same everything. And so if you can mimic that idea, whatever you do when you're brewing, do it consistently, right? I don't know if everybody's doing pour overs nowadays, but if you have a coffee maker, you use the same amount of water, use the same amount of coffee. If it sucks, even though you're being consistent, try a different coffee, try a different roast profile. I think a lot of people get hung up that like a light roast is specialty, but a light roast can be a medium roast. It can also be a dark roast, and maybe that's what you like. Maybe you could change your brewing method, but I would suggest maybe changing up the type of coffee you are drinking. If you're feeling adventurous and nerdy, experiment with how hot is your water when you're brewing? How much coffee do you know how many grams of coffee you're using when you're brewing coffee in the morning? Most people don't. Most people have the little coffee scooper. But for the heck of it, maybe you should look into, as a science experiment, look into how much water, how much coffee, What's the temperature like? Is it consistent every time you do that? Also, how old is your coffee? When did you buy the beans? When were they roasted?
1967 Folgers, back of the cupboard.
Ooh, delicious.
Literally top
Oily.
shelf.
Yeah, I mean, parallels from plant industry to coffee industry, there's many variables, and it's so easy to screw up coffee, but it also can be easy to brew a good cup of coffee if you're observant and if you're intentional. So just start just with the basics. Start with consistency and start with intentionality. What do you want your coffee to taste like? And start changing one variable at a time. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Thank you, Izzy Gump. Well, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you'd like to plug before we leave? Social media sites, cool things happening in your life?
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm not gonna. No, don't contact me.
Forget who I am. This never happened.
There's a reason why nobody knows who I am and nobody knows what I do. No, I do art stuff and some plant stuff online. I feel like my coffee industry and plant industry Instagram is Izzy_lizard at Instagram. But Izzy is spelled IZI. That's like a good safe place to be if you want coffee stuff and plant stuff. Yeah, I do work at Wrecking Ball Coffee Roasters, but you can buy coffee for us. But look, there's so many. There, like if you don't live in San Francisco or Oakland, like go buy coffee from some local company. You don't have to buy coffee from me or our company. For like if you want to donate money, there's barista funds all over the place. Maybe I'll send you a link.
Yeah, I'll add it to the video description.
Nice. Okay, I'll send you a link.
That's why I ask these questions, in case there's anything you want to promote or share. So cool. All right, Izzy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next time.